And we're back. We're live again. It's been a while. But what are we going over this time? Going over using a leak down tester to test your car cylinders if they are, inherent in the name, leaking. This will help determine if you are leaking through your piston rings or your valves. And that's explicitly what this test is for. You can do a compression test. If I can find my compression tester. So, like I said, looking for my compression tester. This guy. This is just a generic compression tester. Works on basically any engine. Has a detachable gauge. There's a pressure relief button on the side. Explain that in a second. Basically just a standard, I believe this is 1/4 inch fitting. On this side is a stepped, fitting. What you can do with this is you can put on different adapter sizes for whatever spark plug tube size you have. Most Japanese cars that I deal with, Hondas, Acuras, Subarus, Toyotas, 14mm spark plug size. So I pretty much only have the one 14mm spark plug adapter. But first thing you would do, suspicious of compression issues, you would use a compression tester. Take all the spark plugs out of your engine, and then you would stick this in each cylinder. Run the engine through a compression cycle. I'm not going to get into it too much because that's not what this video is about. This would tell you your pressures. You can look for any other video about what do these pressures mean. Are they good? Are they bad? Cool. So, already done the compression test. For reference, my 05 XT Outback has thrown a cylinder 4 misfire code. So, obviously, trying to figure what that was. Upon a compression test, cylinder returned 0 psi. Suspicious. Let's check all the other 3 cylinders. Cylinder 2 returned 90 psi. Cylinders 1 and 3 returned approximately 120, 125 psi. That's pretty normal. 90's low, 0's bad. So we need to get a leak down tester and test this. Leak down testers are generally not cheap around here, I guess. Most of the videos that I saw of people doing this, their leak down test kits were like 25 bucks. I can't find one for that cheap. Cheapest I could find is a crappy one from Harbor Freight for 88 bucks. And so I figured, this doesn't seem that hard. Why don't I just build this myself? So that's what I did. Mr. Mateo.
Can you bring this to Dad?
Baby.
Can you bring this to Dad?
Hey, can you bring me the hose? Can you bring me the hose? Here, let's go bring the hose to everybody together. Come on. We got our hose. Little Mr. Mateo here wanted to bring over our hand-built leak down tester. We'll go over all the components. So that's just a nice fitting to keep it clipped on the other side. Yeah, we're making a video, right? So running from one side to the other, we have a 1/4 inch air fitting on this side of a standard regulator. This regulator has the typical, plus minus direction to control the allowed pressure through the system, just like you'd find on a compressor. What do you know? This is for repairing compressors. Unlike a lot of other people I saw who came up with this idea, I'm not going to credit anybody because I had this idea before I thought about looking up what anyone else had done. I added a 2-inch pipe piece here in the middle. Here, babe, I'm going to sit you down. So I added a 2-inch galvanized threaded piece of pipe in between. Hold on, babe. We can play with those in a sec. Here, you want to help me tell the people about the tester? So I also sealed this with gas tape, not plumbing tape. This is rated to 100 psi. That is all we really need. It's the same tape you would use for like a gas line if you're doing work in your house. That is attached to a full close-off ball valve. Spins both ways, closed, full open, closed. Hey babe, let's not beat those around. Well, I'm finished explaining this. Why don't you go over to Mom real quick? You can go over to Mom real quick. Hey, do you want to take this to Mom? Teo? Okay. Struggling a bit. So, that connects into a T, brass T fitting, 1/4 inch all the way around. That is connected with a female 1/4 inch compressor fitting or airline fitting have a generic gauge here that is able to be mounted either from the back or from the bottom. So at the bottom, stuck a male end connection on there so I can actually swap out gauges to read the pressure if I need to. And then that is connected to generic hose fitting, only one that Home Depot had in stock, easily accessible. Had to put a female fitting on one end, male end needed an adapter to go into here, but this is what you would connect to your spark plug adapter and hose in the cylinder, which we'll get to that in a moment. So, why did I want to build this primarily instead of buying one? Well, one, there's money. Didn't really save a lot. This whole getup, about 80 bucks with sales tax, Washington. Part of that is because I wanted it to be nicer and more adjustable. Like, you don't need this nipple extension, you don't need this ball valve. Realistically, you could even do without the T, because you could use this type of gauge, run air in the bottom and out the back. That would work. Be a less controlled system if you're running it through the gauge as opposed to putting it to the gauge. The primary purpose of doing this is you need a way to step and control the flow into the testing side of the gauge from the feeding side of the gauge. So what that means is a lot of people on YouTube came up with this odd idea to take one of these fittings, fill it with epoxy, and drill a tiny hole in it, which will constrict the flow into your testing side. Cool, that's basically what you need to do, but it seems like an absurd way to go about it when this ball valve costs $8. And this is a completely manual controlled, how much air do I want to let flow? Do I need full flow? Do I just want to fill the system, close it off? And what that would do is, let's say this is up at 90 psi now that I've closed it off from the regulator. If that cylinder's holding pressure, this should roughly stay around 90 psi. Or you can watch the gauge go down as it loses pressure. Those of you that have used a leak down tester, but your gauge doesn't say fancy things like zero me out, and then I will tell you if you are leaking a little bit, medium amount, or a lot. Yeah, that's the stupid way to test this, honestly. After reviewing those gauges and how they work, that test system usually runs around 5 to 7 or 9 psi from the regulator on them, and 5 to 7 psi doesn't sound like a whole lot of pressure to legitimately test the seals of an engine that typically, even on cold, through a compression tester, are running anywhere from 120 to 170 psi, let alone the pressures from actual combustion. So 5 to 7 is just a wee bit too low. A lot of people that I saw on YouTube who also were showing how to use these basically did the same thing I'm doing here, just said disregard this gauge, pretend like it's not there, turn up your regulator, and, you know, we'll get to that in a second. So, I am going to go hook this bad boy into one of the cylinders. I also had to make this too, because I was not going to pay for a whole kit just to get the hose, so I've got my threaded spark plug adapter onto the fitting of my hose, and a compressor air hose attachment on the other side. So let's go get this bad boy hooked in. And we're over at the car. The old low 5 Outback XT. There's been many videos about it. You're more than welcome to go to my channel and look at them. We're going to try and jump through this pretty quick just to wrap this up. So I am over here at my car. I've got my air hose from my compressor ready to hook up to my at-home leak down tester. We'll do that. Boop. And I'll give you guys a quick glance how this is set up. So, ooh, it's a bit hard to do with my tripod setup. So, down in there, you can see we are connected to the tester on this side. This is the feed hose down into the cylinder right here. I've got this threaded in the cylinder. Pretty easy to put in. And I'm sure some of you might have the same idea I did. Hey, I've already got a compression tester. I should have my hose and my fitting on it, right? This side of the compression tester, duh, has a one-way check valve in it. doesn't let pressure go in, it will only let pressure come out. Which is why, like I said, I had to make my own little adapter system to get down into the cylinder. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this guy, got our regulator, and I have set my regulator on my compressor to somewhere just under 100 psi, so I know I have enough pressure and flow to do this. So I'm going to crank this guy up, and it's just a wee bit loose from not having any on. So we'll turn it up to, what is that, 20 psi? Let's get the focus better. Yeah, about 20 psi. You can see the test gauge reads out 0. I know it's backwards for everybody because I'm using the front-facing camera. My apologies. But the ball valve is in the off position, so now my regulator is set at 20 psi. So I'm going to crack this guy a little loose. I'm going to assume you guys can hear that. That is air flowing straight through the cylinder. So, to understand what just happened, doing the leak down test, you also need to make sure that your crank position down there on my crank pulley is set in the top dead center for cylinder number whatever you're testing. You're going to need a shop manual for that one or a video specific to your car. So for most Japanese, it's pretty ubiquitous. The crank pulley will have a mark on the back of it, and you line that mark up with a either 0 degree or some type of marking on the block itself. Or in this case, Subaru has a nice little piece of plastic that has like 0 degrees, 30 degrees back, and 10 degrees forward. So I'm going to line that mark up with 0 degrees, and that is top dead center of cylinder 1. How do I find top dead center of cylinder number 2? Rotate the crank pulley 180 degrees. That's top dead center of, firing order. In this instance, it would be, for my Subaru, firing order is 1, 3, 2, 4. So top dead center of cylinder number 1, 180 degrees is then followed by top dead center of cylinder number 3. 180 degrees is then followed by top dead center of cylinder number 2. Ooh, but wait, we're back at the same marking as cylinder number 1. Yes, so top dead center of cylinder number 1 is the same crank position as top dead center of cylinder number 2 in this case. But that also means that cylinder number 1 is up at the top, but it is at the top of the exhaust stroke. So from there, for my situation with a Misfire on cylinder number 4, I would rotate an additional 180 degrees on the crank, and that will put me at top dead center on cylinder number 4. And so going through this test, I found, as is not uncommon with these Subarus, still learning how to use this. Please, comments, corrections, suggestions. Trying to get a new get up here. It's all just a little wonky. Okay, so we're back at the tester. I'm in cylinder number 4. Again, my situation. You should be able to apply the same general logic to your situation, especially if it's a top-end 4-cylinder engine. This is easy. Let's say I have my crank set to top dead center for cylinder number 4. What should happen when I do this, air should not flow straight out somewhere. This is the instance where your brain comes in rather than a gauge telling you you're good, you might be good, you're bad. So if this was at top dead center on cylinder number 4, and my cylinder number 4 had perfect ring seals, perfect valve seals, when I do this, the air would fill this side of the tester, the gauge will jump up, and then when I go to close it, that gauge should stay up some, for at least a little bit, until that pressure dissipates through obvious compression leaks from just the engine being cold itself. The rings aren't perfect seals, the valves aren't perfect seals when it's cold, but it will hold some amount of pressure. And what this tells me is that air is flowing out. I can then look for where the air is going. I can go and listen inside of my throttle body or intake, preferably with the throttle valve open. Run this test. Oh, I can hear air coming out through the air intake. The intake valves are either A, not sealed because you're in the wrong position, or B, not sealed because they have a burnt valve, a damaged seat, something. Whatever it is that's letting it get back into the intake. Same thing for the exhaust side. You can pull off that component of the exhaust and listen for it coming out of the head. You can also, if your exhaust is well sealed enough, go straight to the tailpipe. Listen at the end of the tailpipe. Oh, there's definitely air coming out of the tailpipe. The exhaust valves aren't sealing. The final thing you could check in this situation, you would go to your oil dipstick, run this, fairly low pressure so you can hear it, pull your dipstick out and listen. Yeah, there's air coming out of the dipstick tube. That means that there is pressure getting by piston rings and into your oil pan and finding its way out through the hole you just opened in your dipstick. The final thing you could check is if all of those check out good, you're still losing pressure, take off your coolant reservoir cap, and in this case there's a lot of different things that can mean by reservoir. On this turbo Subaru, that is going to be my upper reservoir for the turbo. I'm going to check there. For a typical Honda, I'm going to check at the actual radiator cap. I know there are a bunch of different ways that the radiator system can be designed, but you basically need to find something that is a large body of coolant. In most cases, that will be the cap to the radiator. Pop that off, run your test. You see any bubbles coming out of your coolant, you've got a head gasket leak. That means that pressure is seeping past the head gasket into the coolant channels around the cylinder and finding its way out of the coolant system. Now, what I'm going to do to exemplify all of this is crank this bad boy up to as much pressure as I can with my other regulator set. We got about 70 psi. Top dead center, it still does. That. Now, you might have seen gauge jumps. That's good-ish. Means it's, not zero. But when I went through this tested, good cylinder 1 and 3 where they actually put out 120 and 125 psi in a compression test. When I did this at 100 psi, that gauge jumped up to 100 psi, even though I didn't close it and, segment the system. What that meant is that the system at least had enough pushback against that pressure to maintain pressure at this gauge. As soon as I went to close this, yes, the pressure dropped, but it was not an instantaneous drop. That means that either A, everything's good, it's just cold and all my seals are a little out. B, I might have some issues with some valve seals or piston ring seals. But either way, those two cylinders haven't given me a code and also tested pretty good in the compression test. Primarily, the issue is cylinder number 4, and as far as I've been able to discern by disassembling the exhaust and all that fun stuff, I've got both burnt exhaust valves on that, as well as cylinder number 2, adjacent to cylinder number 4, has some pressure leaking issues as well. It couldn't return any higher pressure on a compression test of 95 psi. So, that pretty much concludes all of that. My general suggestion is going to be in situations like this when you start looking at specialized tools, a leak down tester. Every mechanic I've talked to that's just a generic mechanic, no personal relation, they quote you about $200 to do a leak down test. It's not bad. I mean, the amount of work it takes to do this, especially for like a Subaru engine, spark plugs are farther down. I actually have the engine disconnected from the engine mounts right now and jacked up to reach the cylinder holes for the spark plugs. But if this was on a 4-banger Honda engine, I could run this test in probably about 10 minutes, maybe less. $200 seems like a lot for a 10-minute test, especially considering this whole gauge setup was about $80 to build. I already own a compressor and hose, which that might be the thing for, someone. I don't own that kind of stuff. I might have to go with a mechanic. But I'm always encouraging for the do-it-yourselfers to figure out how you can understand the concepts behind all of this to, either make your own tools, either find the cheaper version of the tool to get the parts you need from it to build your own version of the tool, as well as trying to understand what the information coming out of these tests are telling you. Because, like I said, an actual leak down tester is just going to give you the equivalent of a dummy gauge that says good, medium, bad. Doesn't really tell you a whole lot, because let's say you're in the bad zone. What's the problem? Valves, rings, head gasket, a hole in your piston. And that's where something like this is going to come in handy, which you can use a generic leak down tester to do this, but you're basically paying for the premium look of this tester and an entire gauge setup that you just disregard. So, like I said, $80 build, because I did it nice. I probably could have done this for about $50, $45, with sales tax already included, except I'm in Washington, and built a basic setup that would let me know all the stuff I'm looking at right now. So, there you go. This is going to be a double labeled video dealing with my Misfire, and I'll dig into that later, as well as building your own leak down tester, how to use it, what you can and can't do with it, and everything else in this video. So thank you for watching. Thank you for all the subscribers that keep coming in. I know I haven't been posting a lot of content lately. Life's been a little crazy, you know, as it has for everybody. Shout out to the little blondie with the curls, Mr. Mateo Fox, who wanted to help Dad make a video today. Wow, it sounds like he's coming to say goodbye. Hey, buddy.
We're gonna vacuum after dinner.
You want to end the video? Come here. So there's Mr. Mateo, who likes to help Dad with a lot of his projects. Can you say hi to everybody? Hi. This has been some of that lifetime consuming stuff, raising children. But like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Suggestions, comments, always helpful. Thank you for watching.